Marjorie Taylor Greene was at Trump's very bitter rally. I mean, seems like he's doing a tour just to remind everybody how butthurt he is, how salty he is, how much he thinks the election was stolen, so on and so forth. I mean, we're 3 years out from the next election, and he's already doing rallies. Like, Jesus Christ, dude. Relax. Go play golf more. Like, you don't need to be doing this now. But anyway, he can't help himself. He needs the adulation of the crowd. So Marjorie Taylor Greene was one of the opening speakers at this Trump rally, and she gave us this terrible moment.
Led by AOC, the little communist from New York City. That's right. Yeah, lock her up too. That's a good idea. She's not an American. She really doesn't embrace our American ways. You want to know why? She has something called the Green New Deal.
The Green New Deal makes her un-American. Here's a question. Did the New Deal make FDR un-American? Don't get it twisted. If Marjorie Taylor Greene lived at the same time as FDR, she would have argued that the New Deal makes him un-American. I have no doubt about it that she would have argued that. Because she is a dyed-in-the-wool, Kool-Aid drinking, hardcore, tribalist partisan hack. It is super obvious. The Green New Deal makes her un-American. So the argument is she's un-American because she doesn't agree with me on politics. Geez, what a narrow definition of American you have. So she calls her the little communist. That also is just hilarious to me because anybody who understands political definitions, anybody, it's really not that hard to look at the stuff that AOC says she's in favor of and then look at where that would make her fall on the political spectrum or what label or definition would apply to her. And when you go issue for issue, it is beyond clear that AOC is just a social democrat. That's all she is. So mild, Norwegian-style social democrat. Just barely left of center internationally. That's all she is. Now, she claims she's a democratic socialist. I haven't seen her advocate many post-capitalist ideas. And democratic socialism is post-capitalist. Social democracy is not really post-capitalist. I mean, I guess arguably it is, but it's really more of a pure hybrid mix of socialism and capitalism. So she's just a mild social democrat, and this jackass is calling her a communist because she doesn't know anything. She doesn't know definitions. She doesn't know labels. She doesn't know facts. But I get it. In their mind, it's like, just label somebody a mean, scary word that right-wingers shit their pants over, and then boom, argument over, and she thinks she won. Well, congratulations. Now, AOC responded to this, by the way, because this blew up on Twitter, went viral, millions of views, and AOC's response was, first of all, I'm taller than her. Or first of all, I'm taller than you. I don't remember how she phrased it. And I mean, I don't need to explain this to you guys, but obviously that's a joke of like, she's being called un-American, she's being called a communist, and her response is like, you called me little, I'm not little. Or you're smaller than me. Because Marjorie Taylor Greene is 5'3". I didn't know that, by the way, until yesterday. And AOC is like 5'6" or something like that. So she's like, I'm not little. First of all, I'm taller than you. But, I mean, listen, that's a joke because obviously she's not addressing the un-American thing and she's not addressing the communist thing. Marjorie Taylor Greene, of course, leave it to her right over her head. She responds like, yeah, but you're a commie. Yeah, that was the joke, Marjorie. That was the joke that AOC was making. Okay, anyway. I mean, just, there's nothing going on up here. Nothing. But, I mean, haven't even talked about the most important part yet. Now, she says it in passing, and I guess you could argue maybe Marjorie Taylor Greene is, like, joking or saying it in jest. I don't know how much I buy that. But she says, yeah, you should lock up AOC, too. Because somebody said lock her up in the audience while talking about AOC, and she's like, yeah, that's a good idea. We should lock her up, too. There's a deep irony in casually musing about locking up your political opponents who haven't committed crimes, but they just disagree with you. So you want to lock up your political opponents as you're saying they're un-American. The most American thing you can think of is supposed to be due process, the Constitution and due process. This is Marjorie Taylor Greene having a colossal diarrhea shit all over the Constitution and all over due process. Lock up my political opponents simply because they're my political opponents. She goes on to say, oh, she's not American because she doesn't embrace our, quote, American ways. What are your American ways, Marjorie? What does that even mean? Does she have to, like, go hunting and fishing and, like, NASCAR in order for that to be the case? I'm sincerely asking, like, what do you mean she hasn't embraced our American ways? What does that mean? Now, listen, you could argue she's saying, hey, culturally she's not in alignment with me and she's not in alignment with the right, so that's what makes her un-American. You could argue that there's underlying xenophobia here. Hey, she's not like the real Americans, and you know what the real Americans look like. Wink, wink, nod, nod. Or you could argue it's purely a political thing. Anything Democratic or anything on the left is un-American by definition. But either way, the entire conversation is idiotic because she's American. So why are we even having this conversation? And I mean, listen, that is the problem, right? Everything, it's immediately nuclear, it's immediately vituperative, and it's totally non-substantive. And I mean, again, to get back to the main point, if somebody supports the Green New Deal, does that make them un-American by definition? No, of course not. Of course not. It means they disagree with you on politics. And we already have, historically, the New Deal. Obviously, that's as American as apple pie now. It helped save us from the Great Depression. But Marjorie Taylor Greene either doesn't know that or doesn't care. And really, I mean, imagine for a second the roles were reversed and it was Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez giving a speech opening up for Bernie or whatever. And she does the equal opposite of everything that Marjorie Taylor Greene does here. Imagine AOC called for locking up Marjorie Taylor Greene. What would the reaction be? Everybody on the right would be like, see, she's like Fidel Castro and she wants to lock up political opponents and she's a totalitarian and she's a communist and she's a tyrant and a dictator and proof. But they say lock up AOC and it's called a random Tuesday. I don't know what day of the week she actually said this on, but the point is they'd say it any day of the week. So, I mean, this is what we're dealing with, man. I have zero tolerance for partisan tribalist hacks. And that's exactly what Marjorie Taylor Greene is. You know, she's not going to hear out individual issues. She's not going to hear out substantive arguments. Anything that she associates with the left, broadly speaking, or the Democrats, broadly speaking, immediately un-American, lock them up, communist, so on and so forth. And listen, I'm just as critical of hyperpartisanship on the Democratic side as well, if it's mindless. But this is really the peak of being mindless. And she has a weird obsession with her. Like, apparently Marjorie Taylor Greene, we covered this story before, she literally chased Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez around Congress. She's like, debate me, or whatever the fuck. She is one of the dumbest as well in all of Congress. You know, I remember, what was the thing we covered where there was a story about how Wall Street and BlackRock are buying up all the houses, and then it's out of the price range now for so many people, or they try to buy it up and then rent it out to people and price gouge them, charge exorbitant rates, or sell it to people and price gouge them. And, you know, she basically responded to it and said, like, this is socialism. You're literally describing capitalism. This is happening under capitalism right now. And there was a tweet that was like, under this system, people at the top take everything, and then everybody at the bottom gets screwed over. And she's like, that's socialism. They're describing something that's happening under capitalism right now, and we have record wealth and income inequality more than even the Gilded Age, and she's still right over her head. I mean, just Nat IQ shit. That's what we're talking about. So anyway, she's going to give us a lot of content over the coming years. And listen, it's low-hanging fruit. It's like shooting fish in a barrel, but what am I going to do? Ignore the fact that now congresspeople on the right are calling for locking up their political enemies over disagreements? By the way, whatever happened to, I don't believe in cancel culture, and I believe in free speech. This is the definition of cancel culture and the definition of being against free speech. Because she believes in the Green New Deal, she's un-American and we should lock her up. So in other words, thought crimes. You want to lock people up for thought crimes. You want to lock people up for saying things that are politically incorrect in your circles. That sounds like canceling to me, don't you think? Ever since Adpocalypse, when YouTube defunded all independent news and politics overnight, we haven't trusted them. We know they can pull the rug out from underneath us at any time. If you enjoy this content, please consider tipping $1 or $2 per month on the Secular Talk Patreon. Link in the video description box below. Thanks for your support.